Hello, everybody, and welcome, and thank you for joining us on another record attendance of our Learning Leaders webinar. For those of you that haven't seen our previous webinars, I wanted to give you some context as to why we had put these on and some of the benefits of learning from other professionals. It was in pre-lockdown where we used to run in-person events at our office in Morningside in Johannesburg on various topics. And one of the greatest feedback that we got was how much people valued being able to share, network, and learn from other learning and development and HR professionals. And that was the impetus and motivation for us to continue providing this experience, although virtually, to be able to provide for you a platform to be able to learn from really some experts in the learning and development field. So thank you for joining us. There are people still streaming in, and yeah, I'm really excited to see some of the brands and some of the names of people that are joining us from all shapes and sizes of businesses across the country in Johannesburg, Cape Town, and Durban, and yeah, what can I say? These are interesting times, and as things feel like they're starting to settle more and business easing up, we're able to deliver more learning, although predominantly more virtually. There's been an incredible pivot and change and acceptance to receiving learning over video conferencing, over online learning. And it's been so heartwarming actually to see how people have been so quick to adapt to the changing circumstances that we find ourselves in. So with all of that going on, there is still the need to deliver training, but it comes with its complications and challenges, working from home while you've got homeschooling happening in the background and all sorts of other technology challenges and time challenges and that sort of thing, whilst business is still continuing to attempt to continue its operations. And so today's topic is really interesting. It's all about, well, learning culture, but I think leans on the overall culture of your business. And I can tell you from personal experience at iLearn, we have really leaned into a culture that we have very consciously and purposefully built over the years that has really stood us in good stead. And in fact, I would even go so far as to say that although we are far apart and not in person, we actually have never been more connected. So today's panel of speakers are going to take us through a discussion. Thank you to everybody that has registered, that has provided some questions to ask the panel. We've selected what we think are the most interesting, and we'll be having a discussion about those. But to kick us off, we have Sarah Rice, who is the Chief People Officer from a really dynamic business called Skynamo, who offers a field sales software solution, and even in these times has a really exciting growth story. And Sarah has previous background and experience in the communications industry and doesn't come from a traditional HR base, and I think really has a wonderful background to share with us and to talk about how to build a learning culture. So Sarah, if you can please unmute and put on your camera and bring you onto the stage. We thank you for joining us. And,
thank you.
Yeah, and we are very excited to hear from you. So thank you for making the time and for making the effort to so that we can learn from you. And yeah, I think I'll leave it to you. You can share your presentation and go for it.
Great, thanks so much. So my name is Sarah. As Richard said, I don't come from a traditional HR background. I come from a communications background, which means occasionally my perspectives can be slightly different. So I'm going to share a perspective I have about learning culture with you and some of the experiments that we've been running at Skynamo. And then I'm hoping that you'll share some of your thoughts and the different things that you are doing with us, because I don't think it's something anyone can really claim to be an expert in. I think all of us are learning and developing and changing as we move through our businesses. So the first thing is that culture is pretty new, and it's, as this comic says, it's not really something we can study. So I thought we'd just start with a discussion about what exactly is culture. So culture is things that we do repeatedly without thinking about it. And then the way I approach culture is that it's not something that we build ourselves. As HR and people ops professionals, our job is to nurture and tend to a culture. So we work with what is already there. And the analogy I like to use is that we are the gardeners. So we tend and fertilize and water and guide and shape the garden or the culture, but it exists already. We've got to work with what is there already. And this is an approach, I think, that we can use when thinking about learning cultures as well. So as we all know, because we're living in them, we are in the weirdest time. Like, we are in very strange times right now, and the world is changing so quickly and so randomly. It's hard to keep up. And at times like this, our company cultures are incredibly important because they have a way of holding us firm and holding us on solid ground inside the chaos. And I think learning cultures become even more important because our learning cultures can help us become more resilient and adaptable and help us appreciate and accommodate for the change that is happening. When I was preparing for this, I decided to move and ask the wonderful people of the internet what exactly a learning culture was, because I had an instinctive understanding but didn't really have the words for it. And what the internet told me is that a learning culture is one where learning is valued. So that's the first thing. Does the company value learning? Where employees proactively seek out opportunities. So there's a movement from the people in your business towards learning. It's not constantly just offered to them. They're not passive receivers of the learning. And it's done to improve and make sure we are more adaptable and make sure we can stay relevant. And what this told me is that in companies with good learning cultures, learning is a habit, it's a mindset, it's not a task. And what nobody said was that a learning culture is a training budget. And that felt really important to me because we are in this topsy-turvy time. Budgets are being moved and slashed and cut and appropriated by other parts of the business. And if we only think about growing a learning culture by being able to spend money, then we are going to feel very trapped and like there's nowhere for us to go. But it seems that is not entirely true. So when starting to think about a learning culture, as when we start to think about culture, we need to start with what's there. So what is in the sort of garden analogy, what does the soil look like? And the three areas where we can make an impact and where we have some measure of control are people, approach, and technology. So when starting to think about how to guide and tend to your learning culture, these are the areas to start investigating. And the first place is to start with people, because that's where behavior lives. And as with all things, it all starts from the top. So we need to start with what are your leaders' behavior around learning. Like, is your CEO someone who is hungry for new knowledge? Is she moving out into the world and seeking information and asking questions and looking for answers? Or is she staying alone in her room and thinking like, I've got it all together, I don't need help from anyone? What do your managers do when they have questions they need answered? What do they do when they don't feel completely settled in the knowledge that they have? And that's where we have to begin. We have to begin with what is there. Like, how is the culture working at the moment? How's information being received and how's it being sought out? And because if that behavior in your business is not receptive, then it doesn't matter how beautiful and how amazing the interventions or the technology or the programs that you start to launch, they're not going to land and they're not going to work. The next thing we want to think about is the approach, which is basically what is the attitude to learning. The biggest challenge we have around this is that learning requires you to not know. It requires you to be in a state of unknowing or uncertainty. And companies are not in the business of not knowing. Like, most companies are in the business of providing answers or products that have an answer. So there can be some resistance between the certainty of business and the uncertainty of needing to learn. So companies need to be ready to be wrong. People need to be ready to fail, and there needs to be a willingness to move into the uncertainty. And that can be extremely tricky. But if businesses are able to acknowledge and reward learning and reward lessons and even reward the lessons that come from failure, you can start to create an approach to learning that is softer and creates a willingness within your population, the people in your business, to keep learning. The next thing to look at is your technology, which is how is learning delivered. I use the word technology really broadly, like I consider books a piece of technology. So is your business very book driven? I know our CEO reads a lot and is often sharing those books across the business. So books are very much one of the technologies that we use in order to grow a learning culture. Do you use only formal training? Is it very expert-led, or do you have peer-to-peer learning that happens in your business? Do you use a tech platform, or is it always in person? Is there mentoring? Is there coaching? Are you a coaching-led business, or are you a fairly didactic business? So look at the existing technologies that you are using, because that'll give you a sense of what has worked before and what hasn't worked. And then you can start to play with what other kinds of technology you can start to bring into the business to deliver learning experiences, and find ones that are able to be led by the employee and not always sort of fed in from management, from the business. So the question for me around technology is, how are learning moments created and how are they shared in your business? So once we have that understanding and we understand what is happening right now and where, like, what are the in these three aspects of people, approach, and technology, what is the dynamic? Then we know what is, they signals to what can potentially work in your business into creating or expanding or enhancing the learning culture that you already have. My coach always says, what is the listening that your speaking is falling into? And I think by asking yourself these questions around the behavior of your people, the attitude to learning, and the technology that's working already, you can get a really good sense of what the listening is in your business. And then you can start to launch some initiatives. I thought I'd just tell you quickly about some of the stuff that we're using at Skynamo. I don't think we're getting it perfectly right. Like, we're getting some things right, some things are not going so well, some things have worked and then we haven't continued with. So this is by no means like the be-all and end-all of learning culture interventions. But I thought I'd just tell you some of the things that we have found to work, and maybe it can help you. And then I would love to hear what's working in your organization. One of the things that worked quite well was a manager's book club, where a book was selected, and then every week the managers would read a chapter and then get together to discuss it. It worked really well with one book because we chose a good one, and then it worked very badly with another book because we chose a book that didn't work so well for the group. So content is really important when working with that intervention. The reason I know it worked is because a bunch of people who weren't managers got together and called what they called the Unmanager Book Club. And that shows me that we really do have a learning culture, because people who didn't have access to this meeting, this book club, then created their own, which I thought was really fabulous. We obviously have much more structured learning as well, so we do send our people on courses. Skynamo, as a rule, is not very good at being told what to do, so we have found that the best kinds of ways to do skills transfer is either peer-to-peer, where it's people within the business sharing information or technology that they've been playing with. This happens a lot in the integration and our development teams. We also found that coaching-led interventions work much better than traditional ones. So we've just introduced a year-long coaching-led management program that operates both at Stratco and middle management. And that is we're really starting to see shifts in the business and shifts in our managers because of this. We encourage mentoring, so both within the business and outside. So we, particularly with our people who are moving into a new management role, we invite them to go and find mentors who can help them and support them in their role. And lots of books, as I said before. We're very book mad. We have, I've never had anyone be turned down if they were wanting to read a book for their work, which I find really encouraging. And then we also do some talks. So what we were finding in our development team is that we were all getting a bit kind of group thinky around how we thought about shaping that particular team. So about 8 months ago, we introduced something called CTO Talks. So we bring in CTOs from other businesses to just share and discuss their experiences of managing their technology teams. And that's also started to work really well. I don't think, what I like about the way we are tending to the learning culture is there are lots of small interventions that are happening at a big level, like this big kind of management-wide program, as well as a very small level, which is managers being able to approve like books to be read or little courses to be going on. And there's a lot of sharing in the business. So if people find interesting articles, they will share that within their teams, and they will share that with managers and everybody. So there's a constant kind of search for new and interesting information that can help us be better. And that really excites me. And then I'm just going to finish off by saying that cultures take time. They look just like gardens. You know, you don't plant a seed and then 3 days later, unless it's a bean, but mostly you don't plant a seed and 3 days later have a tree. Like this stuff, it takes time and it takes constant energy. But it also doesn't require continual grand gestures. I love this picture because I think when you're starting something, particularly you're starting something in a resource constrained time like we're living in now, it's to look for the small experiments and the tiny changes that you can make. So you can drop in interventions and just see how they roll within your business. But it doesn't have to be big and grand, and it doesn't have to deliver immediately for it to be actually making a very positive impact on your business. So I think all of us can start today with something small and something conscious that can help us improve and grow our learning cultures in our business. And that's it. That's what I have for you today. Thanks so much for listening to me.
Thank you, Sarah. That is outstanding, and thank you for setting the tone. Some really gold nuggets there for us to talk about. And with that, I'd like to invite Roz and Wendy, our two other panel speakers, to turn on their camera, unmute the microphone, to help us kickstart a discussion about learning culture. So firstly, let me introduce Roz, who's based in Cape Town and is the People Development Manager for a business called FinVision, and Wendy French, who is the Head of Learning and Development for DFA, who is responsible for all the fiber in the ground. And yeah, we're very excited and very grateful that you guys have joined us today. Thank you. And yeah, I think let's kickstart a discussion. So got a couple of questions lined up, which have come from our audience. And the first one is quite an interesting one, and maybe sort of ties in nicely with you know, Sarah, what you were saying, and is that how can an organization create a sustainable culture or a sustainable learning culture? So maybe like what are the rituals, what are the things that, you know, help ensure that there's this ever-present awareness of growth and learning in a business? Wendy, you want to kick us off?
Sure, thanks, Richard. So it's got to be a partnership. I'm going to link back to what Sarah said and use her analogy of the garden. Learning and development will have programs, they'll have intents. So they might choose the place of the garden, but they can't do it alone. The line manager has to be part of it. We need to have people who will come and water the seed that is planted. So the individual can be the seed. We can put the individual in the garden. We can make sure that learning is occurring. But if it's not nurtured, if it's not fertilized, that flower will never, never bloom. So we need to have a relationship with top management where they believe in learning, where they promote learning. And it's not, again, going back to what Sarah said, it's not learning and development having a catalog saying, hey, pick from this list. It's rather saying, what do you need? How do you best need to develop? And what do we have that can help you? And it's not necessarily a classroom-based intervention. The help could come from reading the book, like you said, Sarah. The help could come from coaching, job rotation, job enrichment, mentoring, buddying, peer learning. So it's getting all the players in the organization involved to play their part, because anybody who thinks that a learning organization can be formed by a small team is wrong. It needs to have that support from the top, the visible support from the top, and learning needs to then become part of the individual employee's real life. So we, for example, after training, we make sure that there are opportunities for people to apply what they've learned. So we give them action learning projects. We've just done 26 leadership action learning projects in the past year, where we took real business concerns and we asked people to go and research them and come up with solutions. So it shouldn't be a separate activity outside of the organization. It needs to be integrated.
Mm.
That is fantastic. And tell me, when you say it's got to come from the top, Roz, what in your experience, to what extent do you need the leadership in the business, and how do they drive it?
Yeah, Richard, that's a great point. And if you don't have leaders who are invested in learning, who themselves want to learn, it's difficult then to embed a culture of learning in the organization. That kind of leading from the front is really important in this area. But also building on what both Sarah and Wendy have said, it's not necessarily huge interventions that need to be done. It can be smaller aspects, recognition of learning, really embedding it into the day-to-day activities of what's going on into the organization. Sharing, being unafraid to share what's working well, what isn't working well, what they've learned, what they would like to learn, so that it doesn't become this separate aspect of the organization. It becomes embedded into the organization. And I guess purpose is important there as well. If the individuals in the organization know what their purpose is, both personally and in terms of the company outputs, and that's aligned then with the company's purpose, that can create a lovely synergy where everyone is engaged and energetic and wanting to be learning. But yeah, leadership is huge, and it can be useful to start with some interventions in leadership. I can give an example of something we've done recently over the last year. Is we thought it would be good to enable self-awareness in our leadership team, and then use that as a platform to create awareness around team members and sort of cascade it within the organization. So we launched a project using the Enneagram. We had some workshops, we had one-on-one coaching, and we've seen how this has given, as we've rolled it out further, the whole organization a kind of language that we can now talk about. So we can talk about our Enneagram numbers, we can talk about our strengths, we can talk about what's not going so well. We even have conversations about, oh, I need to lean on this wing or that wing, or draw energy from another type. So that gave our people, by seeing leaders demonstrating this, it gave our people, it piqued their interest. And I think as humans, we love to know more about ourselves. And of course, we love to know more about the people that we're working with. So it gave us a platform to embark on that and then leverage it, and to understand that we're not all the same. We're different. We have different strengths. We have different ways of operating. Are we thinking? Are we feeling? Are we action-centered? How can we get that interaction going in our teams so that we communicate usefully to our different types, to our different centers of expression? How do we give feedback in a way that is building up, not breaking down? How do we leverage our relationships? How can we understand why we do certain things and why other people do things differently? So the leaders embracing that process really enabled then for us to roll it out in the rest of the organization.
That's brilliant insight. Thanks, Rose. That's fantastic. But I think what would be interesting to know in sustaining a learning culture, and I suppose there'll always be the difference between hard skills development versus perhaps more behavioral skills, something like a self-awareness. Sarah, in your view, like, do you need a hardcore performance management system to ensure that we stay on track?
Oh, I hate the words hardcore with performance management.
That's true. I meant maybe stringent or structured.
Yeah, I think I'm a big fan of conversation, and I think what a structured performance management process does is it gives dedicated opportunity for managers and their teams to have conversations, and it really helps. It just really helps you to get clear about where you want to go inside your team, what the team needs from you, how the team aligns with the objectives of the business, and then you can see gaps in your learning. So I'm a big fan of structuring conversations so that they happen, and then making sure within each of those performance guiding conversations that there's a question about, like, what support do you need and what can that support look like? And our default is always to go like, I need training, which sometimes you do, but often it can be around like what skills already exist within the organization that you can pull from. Are there books you can go on, books you can read? Are there online courses you can use? So I think, yeah, I think it's around structuring so that the conversations happen.
Okay, excellent. So just quickly, we had a question. Someone really wants to know which book really worked well that you mentioned earlier.
Well, it was actually, it was Radical Candor by Kim Scott, around how to give and receive good feedback, which is the, yeah, if you can get that right as a manager, I think you're getting 80% right.
Fantastic. How do you determine the topics? Who chooses the books? Is it your choice or the CEO?
Neither. It's a collaboration. So then we throw a whole bunch of books into the, a whole bunch of ideas in, and then come up with a topic. Although come up with a book. Although obviously our CEO is heard quite loudly, so if he has a view, it can often be taken.
Okay, fantastic. All right, the next question I want to ask is all around how, in building a culture of learning, when people are too busy, overwhelmed to stop working and to invest time in learning. Like, I don't know, and I've spoken to many people that over the last 3 months, I have never worked harder. And I can tell you personally, like, learning was not on the calendar. It was operations. Wendy, I'd love to hear from you. Like, how have you overcome this? Because you do an incredible amount of learning in the business. And I'm sure you hear that excuse a lot.
Yes, so Richard, DFA is probably one of the busiest organizations across my career that I've seen. We're performance driven, things happen quickly, we move quickly, we respond to customers, and learning needs to happen at the same time. So obviously that's a relevant challenge that you're mentioning. I think the learning has to matter to the person. So if there's no what's in it for me for the person, they're going to always use busyness to say, I'm too busy, I'm achieving this. You have to have integrated the learning into their individual goals, into their team goals, and into the company strategy. If they can see the benefit for themselves, they'll engage with you. If not, they're going to just not participate or not be engaged, and that's what we really don't want. So what we do, we engage with people around what they need from the beginning when they join DFA. As you join DFA, we have a 90 days to competence plan where we establish what you already know, and we look for gaps, and we make sure that we, around the full realm of competence, we prepare you for what the role is going to need. So we look at exposing you to our strategy, exposing you to our values, having a look at meeting all your key stakeholders. We look at then all the competencies, knowledge, as well as attitude and behaviors. We continue with that, and the link of why I'm mentioning this is we continue with it in the personal development plans. But in your personal development plan, we ask you the same question twice. We say, for your role, where do you believe you need to develop? Where does the company think you need to develop, but where do you want to develop? Because you see, if we just take people and we say, because you're in this role, this is what you have to learn next, we might not have reached into the person's own interest area, and they may well not want to develop in that area. And it's been proven that people can't perform well in an area that's not an interest area for them for longer than 2 years. So we carefully check before we develop people, are we developing you in line with your interests? Do you have any interest in doing this? We also make sure that line managers are committed to the learning of people. So we get line manager nominations for learning as well. I'm talking about the training side, not the informal side now. And you find people really are interested. People want to job shadow. People want to be coached. People want to find people that will invest in them because they know there's something in it for them at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. So, I mean, it just sounds like more and more how important a structure within an organization will drive learning. But what you're saying is, you know, we've got to make sure that it's within their interest. Obviously, we're hoping we're putting people in the right roles for the right reasons, for their own, you know, sort of interest in career succession and what have you. But yeah, I think, you know, we've all seen it when a manager tells their employee that they have to go on a course, and the interest and impact of that learning when they don't want to be there is obviously just complete waste of time. Roz, tell me, in your consulting days, I'd be interested to know where, you know, you obviously dealt with lots of clients in different ways and means, but how were you able to overcome the excuse of I'm too busy for learning?
I think it's a lot around what's been said already. It's so important to get the buy-in, and the what's in it for me comes from that. Because if a person can see this is going to serve me well now, I can do my current job better, but even more important, it's going to enable me to progress my career in the future. I think that's such a catalyst. People have aspirations. They don't want to stay in the same job forever. They want to be able to progress in the organization. So by linking all of those things together, and just interestingly, something we found's worked quite well in FinVision at the moment with our technical training. Our data analysts have to keep up to date with all of the new legislation and etc. around that. We found having peer training really works well. So small team meetings, only for maybe an hour or two every so often, focused on a particular topic that's a hot topic at the moment that our clients want to know about. And whoever's got the most knowledge in that area talks the rest of the team through it. They can have discussions, ask questions. Sometimes they're really heated and generate a lot of energy around that. But that's also a great way of enabling training, but without giving it the training label that people then are able to say, oh no, I'm too busy for training. So it's relevant to what they have to do now, how they interact with their clients, but also talks to expanding knowledge, growing themselves, and enabling a career. And I think it's that we have to move away from that old-fashioned idea of having, you know, a training needs analysis in an organization and then using it as a kind of tick exercise. So very different to what Wendy was describing of engaging with a person one-on-one, understanding where are they now, what are they going to need going forward. That's a totally different conversation to this, oh my word, we have to have training. Yeah, these look like good courses. Yeah, we have to just force people to go. That sort of approach won't work. It is around tending the garden, nurturing, watering, and the what's in it for me enables us as gardeners to assist in that process and get a win-win for the individual and for the organization.
Fantastic, thank you. So we got this question maybe 5 or 6 times, which is an indication of the market, which is, you know, how do we continue learning and lean on a business's culture when your budget's been cut, either to zero in some cases, or much less than what you had initially planned 3 months ago. So yeah, I'd love to learn about what are the tactics you think that people can use to still continue providing learning that's maybe more cost effective, but hopefully with the same impact. Sarah, I don't know if you've got that problem with Scanamo, so I'm not sure if budgets are being cut,
yeah.
but
no, budgets haven't been cut, but I did spend all of it in one thing. So I am in a budget constrained area. The coaching-led
get creative.
Yeah, the coaching-led program took, because it's just so intensive, it took most of the budget. I think what I like about money as a constraint is that it pushes you to be way more creative. Like, it's very easy to throw money at a problem, and it forces you to really think about what is valuable and what is needed here. So I think my answer to that is, it makes you really focus on what the challenges are. Like, where can, like the slide said, where can the smallest difference make the biggest impact? So if you've got 6 or 7 things that need to be addressed, what is the thing that will make the biggest impact on the business? And then what are other ways of meeting the need? If the expensive intervention of sending all 6 people on a project management course isn't available to you, then what is available? What free courses or cheaper courses through platforms like Udemy, like what exists there? What videos are available? What peer learning is available? So then you just have to get super creative and break out of the mindset that the only valuable learning is instructor-led, expert-led, in-person learning.
That's true. Yeah, and I think there's a big push for self-paced learning in that respect. And you know, I think also saw something interesting at a client recently where their budget was cut, but they still used WhatsApp, and they got line managers within the business to record a 2-minute video, which they would distribute once a week on a particular theme. Instead of having a external outsourced instructor, which comes at a cost. So you know, and at least there's still some knowledge sharing in a way of peer-to-peer learning from each other within the business. And suppose we shouldn't forget how much knowledge we have in our businesses, in the industries that we're in. Wendy, I mean, are you doing anything interesting to combat lower budgets?
Well, I think anybody in learning has to do that all the time. I'd love to have seen the context around these questions, because when people ask about the learning budget, they're normally asking from one of 2 spheres. How can we still give our employees meaningful interventions without a big budget? And the other context would be, and it normally is this, how can we still get our triple BEE points with less of a budget? So I'm going to attack it from both sides. What we do on the triple BEE side is you can approach various organizations and have your material accredited for CPD. And that allows you to, instead of just running it as informal training, it allows you to claim for it under different categories. But to me, our focus should never be on the triple BEE. Our focus always, and a DFAD is, it's always adding value to the business. So in answering the question, I would come from the other side, and I think Sarah has already addressed it to some degree. How would you add value to the individual and make sure that they could still get training interventions? So we prepare our people, we have a learning and development model, and we prepare our people for how to learn as they come into the organization. We in fact let them go through a series of videos on how to learn and develop themselves. We let them know that they are too a player in developing themselves. It's not that they're passive people sitting back waiting for DFA to wave a magic wand and now they're going to develop. They also need to develop themselves. So our learning model says that 50% of learning will happen on the job. 30% of learning will be what you've learned before you came to DFA. You're not coming as a blank slate, you're coming with something that's already happened, and you now need to learn to apply that learning in a DFA context. And 20% of learning will be through formal interventions. And in the background of a model like that, we've always got room for the 50% of interventions that can happen at a very low cost. So coaches are there. Coaches will always be coaching, and that's not going to cost us anything additional. Small individual projects can still be done collaboratively across teams to learn various aspects of the business. And hence, as I was saying earlier on, all these action learning projects we've done after training, those truly allow learning to be embedded and for the person to walk away with knowledge of something different. So yes, we are addressing it, but yes, it is a very real issue.
That's fantastic. And to what extent are you doing training over video conferencing? Has there been any pushback on receiving training virtually?
No, so we've taken a lot of our classroom-based sessions. It's actually helped us on video-based conferencing in terms of cost, because now we don't need to provide lunches for delegates. So we've got a little bit of extra money from that. So we didn't have a classroom cost because we used our own classrooms. But people are quite happy to come to Teams meetings. We've just adjusted. So we can't do an 8-hour training session anymore. Nobody can sit behind a computer for 8 hours and listen. The concentration span just isn't big. And we haven't adjusted to just putting up PowerPoint and running through PowerPoint. We still break into training rooms in the training session. So people go into small groups and they have their discussions. We make sure we still have our fun activities. We'll ask somebody in a gap to go away and come back with a hat that signifies their mood for the day. So we keep it alive, we keep it energized, and yes, we do a lot on Teams.
Fantastic. That's great to hear that people have adapted very quickly. That's awesome. Our next question is also has come up quite a bit in the previous webinars, which we haven't addressed, but was on and around how do you build a learning culture where the technological resources are limited and staff are mostly not office bound. Wendy, you probably have a lot of remote field workers, technicians. How do you combat that?
So we're very lucky to have the Oracle Learning Platform. So on the Oracle Learning Platform, our staff can access our online training on their cell phones. So that really helps us. So depending on the type of learning, so we would have virtual instructor-led facilitation where we believe that somebody needs to learn an interpersonal skill. We don't like to make that type of learning just pure online learning. But there are topics like recently we've done ethics training. We offer that via our online Oracle platform, and even our learners, not just our staff, were able to pull the learning up on their cell phones, go through the learning. It's interactive SCORM-based learning. They could answer their questions during the training, and there were no problems there whatsoever.
Great. Roz, have you dealt with the clients in the past where non-office based workers you found it difficult to get learning to them? Or any case studies?
Yeah, so similar to what Wendy is saying, is using what is available. And as you were highlighting earlier, the example of managers sending a little WhatsApp, doing a short voice message or recording a little video. Most people nowadays have a smartphone, they can access that. So there is an awful lot that you can utilize in that way. And yeah, I'm thinking of a project that I was involved with a few years ago where it was training field workers, and they had to have a whole new way of actually managing their stock control and the movement of items. And it was all based around using phones. So not only the side of it in terms of recording the movement of stock and allocating and all of that kind of thing, but the actual training itself was done via phones. So I think when we talk about technical online training, we sometimes tend to think we need a lot of stuff. You know, we need a laptop or a big computer screen or this or that, but so much can be done just utilizing what is available. And phones, everybody has them. We use them all the time for social media interactions and so forth. So there's no reason why we can't extrapolate our learning into those sort of platforms as well, and make the most of what we have in that way.
Yeah, a big complaint I often hear is data and the cost of data.
Yeah.
And does the company have to provide it? What have you done in that instance? Sarah, I don't know if you've had any experience there. You know, they give reversible.
Yeah, no, so I can't be useful here. Sorry.
That's okay. Wendy, I would imagine you have, seeing as though you are the internet actually.
DFA is very generous. So yeah, even our learners have been provided with data. So we've been very generous, especially during the lockdown period.
Okay, so you'll just give them SIM cards or a router to use specifically when they need to access online or mobile learning.
And of course, we monitor. So the learners, I get reports on if a certain learner has exceeded their data, and then we look into why or what project they were busy doing. But it's people are, if you allow people to be responsible, they tend to be responsible. And we haven't had any big data issues with, like, our learners, for example. They've been very, very responsible.
That's fantastic. I mean, even the provider like Rain, who does it a set monthly fee with no cap on your data, that also sort of just completely removes that barrier to entry, and I think at a very affordable cost. So yeah, I think that's hopefully becoming less and less of an issue. And I think the reality is, if you are going to do virtual training and you're going to be doing digital training, which you kind of have to at the moment, you've got to just remove that barrier, just provide the data and build it in somehow into your costing, because the benefit you will receive should far outweigh the cost of the data. And yeah, I look forward to a time when that question doesn't come up anymore and it's just like obvious. So yeah.
I agree, Richard, and it boils down to your learning being meaningful. So the data is worth the cost if you're giving people what they really need.
Yes, yeah. We've been getting some questions from the audience, which has been really cool. And one which I'm not sure, we may have sort of spoken about earlier, which was specifically around trying to get learning to people that are very busy at the moment, and that we've been working really hard. But this, you know, this particular question was, you know, how do you position training right now? All right, so right now everyone's like sort of operationally focused, really busy. You know, you know, for lack of forcing someone to do training, how do we inspire people to do training at a time now where just operationally so tight? Roz, you want to help us there?
Okay, I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier about trying to enable the person to see what advantage it will be to them. So back to that, what's in it for me? And that even though it's a really difficult time, there's a lot of pressures, and people, let's face it, we're all anxious, we're all fearful, we have different things that we're dealing with that we haven't been dealing with prior to this unique situation that we find ourselves in. But to still find a way of touching that person's purpose, of igniting that purpose, creating excitement for them, positive energy for them, that this will be helpful to them and to the company as well, but giving them more of the focus that this is something that actually could really benefit them in the here and now of the circumstance, and kind of almost break up the constant pressure of the operational issues that people are dealing with. So, you know, some time out for yourself, something that really is meaningful for that person. And it helps them to remember, I do have purpose, I do have passion, I know why I'm doing this, despite all. Maybe that's a way of helping to ignite.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah. Sarah, and in your experience?
So coming out of a comms background, I always try and figure out how to sell it. Like, how do I sell this piece of training? And I recently had to do some training with the managers on a new onboarding flow. And the way I sold it, I was like, if you give me 20 minutes of your time, I'm going to save you days. So I sort of did like a time trade-off. And because if they knew how the onboarding was going to work, there would be a lot of time that they would save. So I think it comes back exactly to what Roz was saying, like, is the training valuable, and how do you communicate its value up front so that people can commit? And if you can't communicate its value, I would question whether the training is something, or the learning intervention is something that is needed now. Because if people can't prioritize it, either you're not selling it right, or actually it shouldn't be a priority right now. So the audit, or also as people who are leading the training initiatives, to be quite loose about when the training actually isn't appropriate for right now, and to pull it back.
What are you finding to be the most important topics to train at the moment? Anything that's sort of more hot than it would have been in normal times? Sarah?
Our focus is very much on interpersonal skills. So with everyone going remote, it's like, yeah, it's really hard to keep the relationships going, the working relationships going, because we've kind of, as animals, as human animals, we've lost half the skills of being able to relate to each other. So we're finding a lot more in terms of like interpersonal skills, and then also, yeah, it's all the stuff Rose was talking about, like with Enneagram, like learning to know yourself better, learning how to be slightly more vulnerable in meetings, learning how to open up around your feelings. It's the soft skills are definitely where we're starting to focus, particularly at a management level. Managers are being asked to really level up in terms of their ability to communicate and hold their teams in this time.
Yeah. And what sort of interventions have you done? I mean, just to share with you what we've been doing at iLearn is we have a weekly, we call it our iShare meeting. And every Friday morning, the whole company for an hour gets together. And we have a performance coach, Karina, that is an absolute angel in our world. And she helps not only coach staff, but then in this particular session, her and I have a conversation on a particular topic. Mostly for like 30 minutes, and everyone's camera has to be on so we can see everyone, which is another thing we had to overcome. And then for the next 30 minutes, each person has 30 seconds to check in. And it's just such a nice engagement, a way of engaging with people when you don't see them or speak to them all so often. It's been such a wonderful thing for the business to help maintain level of interconnectedness and our culture. Are you doing anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the check-in is vital, because it's so easy when you're working remote to go straight into business and you forget that you're dealing with a human being. You know, and then suddenly it just becomes like task shifting. You know, I'm just trying to tip tasks off my table into yours, instead of remembering that I'm dealing with an actual human being whose body continues below the shoulder and has muscles around them, and it's just like waiting for me to tell them what I need to be done. So there's a fantastic thing on Slack, actually, if anyone uses Slack in their businesses, called the Geek Bot. And we've set up a whole bunch of check-in questions that the lead team fill in every morning at 7 o'clock. And it's a great way of just having we immediately know where each of us are at emotionally, which really helps us engage well with each other during the day.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Maybe
Roz?
I can just jump in there. Our teams that work together have been doing check-ins and video calls and discussions and so forth. And then because we are a smallish company, something that I've been very privileged to be able to do is that I call around everybody. So every couple of weeks, I literally call every single person and check in with them. And it is about how they're doing. So it's not just about work and is the technology working for you? We touch on that, but it's more coaching, and it's more about how are you feeling, what's showing up for you, what are you struggling with, what are you okay with, have you got any particular worries? Just to feel that they're held and supported, even though we are far apart. But as you're saying, Sarah, they matter, they're people, there's more than just this bit, there's all the rest of it, there's the heart, there's, you know, all of the emotional aspects that people are struggling with, and just recognizing that there are highs and lows, and people have good days and bad days. And we've been in a very open, if people have said, I need a mental health day, I can't today. We've been very open to that, and being able to say, sure, take it, do what, can we help? What else do you need? What do you feel would enable you to feel better? And that's okay. And in a warm, caring, non-judgmental kind of way, so that people don't feel like, oh, I can't say that because I'll be viewed as being weak. You know, we've been able to say, this is good, we're happy for this. Let's acknowledge what's tough about
I
this.
love that. Yeah, that's
We've
really
been doing
good.
the same. Yes, we've been doing exactly the same, Roz. We've been checking in the HR business partners and L&D together, groups of 6 in the regions, online, short coffee cup conversation. How are you? What are your current challenges? What are you currently focusing on? And what can we as a bigger HR team do to make your life easier during these times? And the guys are loving it. They said, can't we do this every month? Can't we always do this? Let's not limit this to lockdown. What our CEO's also been doing, and he's been praised widely for this, is he's doing company broadcasts every Wednesday morning, ensuring that everybody's up to date with what's happening in the business, where the business stands, checking in on various issues, calling the Exco members to give feedback in their areas. And we do engagement surveys, and from the engagement surveys, we've just also seen how people are appreciating this regular check-in. There's almost more communication now, even though we're more separate from each other, and they're loving it.
That's too wonderful. That's brilliant. Yeah, I was sharing earlier how I feel like in our team, we've actually never been better connected. And the trick is the frequency of communication, the authentic, transparent, human to human type of communication, I think really goes a long way. And I love the idea of a mental health day. I'm going to steal that one.
Really good.
So thank you. Yeah. All right, so we are at the top of the hour. That was an absolutely fabulous discussion. Thank you so much for making the time and for sharing your amazing experience and knowledge, and well done. I think you can be very proud of what you guys are doing and the impact that you're having and holding people through this time, be it through learning, be it through coaching, or just simply by support. So yeah, it was a really great session, and thank you.
Cool. Thanks so much, Richard.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we'll see you again next month. Thank you.
Thanks.
Ciao for now.
Bye.
Bye.